Eventually I became semi-conscious, and the doctor says to me, you have a baby that's dead inside of you for several weeks, and you need to have surgery. And at that point I said to him, too much pain, just let me go. Just let me go. The next thing I experience is I'm on the ceiling, and I'm looking down on my body on this operating table. And it's kind of interesting. Up until then, I'd never seen the inside of an operating table. See, I just come from a country that didn't have television. And I'm amazed at the number of people and the way they're moving around, you know, the nurses, the doctors. And I'm up in the ceiling, and I'm like, wow, but how can I be in two places at the same time? And then the doctor picked up the instrument. And I looked at it and I thought, hell no, he's not going to cut me open. How do I get off the ceiling? Listen to the story very well. I'm processing clearer than I would if I was conscious in a dramatic situation. How do I get off the ceiling? Well, I'm here to tell you, you know those teachers that tell you that your thoughts turn into words and your words turn into energy that creates action? Believe it. No sooner I said, how do I get off of this ceiling? In front of the doctor. And I'm going, hello, hello, this is me. You know, you don't need to do this, whatever it is you want to do, hello. I don't understand. He's not paying any attention to me. So something in my head says, try the females. Female are more intuitive, you know. So I'm running from nurse to nurse, explaining, I'm normal, please don't do this. But nobody seems to be able to recognize and that I'm there. And so the next thing I know, all hell breaks loose in the operating room. I flatline. And I'm looking at the graph and I'm going, wait a minute, these people seem to be crazy. Now the instruments in the operating room is not working because you could not explain to me in any kind of way that I could have just died. But I'm processing, and I'm aware of everything that's going on. So then the doctor picks up the thing that they use to shock you back. And because I was in spirit, I could see the corona of electricity around me, and I'm like, hell no. If I'm not about to die, I'm not going to stay here and allow them to put that level of electricity on me. How do I get out of here? And no sooner I said those words, I found myself through the ceiling and into a dark tunnel. Now when I say to you it's a dark tunnel, I don't think you can begin to understand that level of darkness. It was darkness that seeps deep into your soul. And I'm in this absolutely dark tunnel wondering, well, where is this going to lead to? When a speck of light appeared. And it begins to oscillate. And of course, if you're in a very dark space and light appears, your eyes get drawn to the light. So I'm drawn to the light and I'm watching this oscillating light, and with each time it goes around, it expands. And then I come to I'm moving almost at the speed of light. And then I can see the entrance or the exit of the tunnel. And the thought in my head is, if I ever recover from this experience, if I entered that velocity of light, it would burn the Cornelius out of my eyes. And I merged. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, there are no words in any language to explain the joy, the bliss, the glory, the love in that moment when you merge with light. It's the most awesome experience, and the only way I can describe it is that piece of scripture speaks about joy unspeakable and full of glory. Today I spend a lot of time helping people to transition from hospices, and what I bring is, you're about to experience the joy of light and love. So I merged with the light, And I'm feeling absolutely amazing and exhilarating, and I'm aware of this light, that I've become a part of the light. And then the thought again says, well, how do you move about in this environment? And instantly I'm moving again. And now I come to what may have looked like a Roman, you know, the Romans built those big pavilions with those pillars. And in those days, you know, televisions were this big and they were cumbersome. I obviously had never seen a full screen, but the screen was probably as big as the length from here to here. And the screen appeared, and when it appeared, it began to scroll. And the screen was divided into 3 columns. The column on the left was my life the way I had written it. Don't let anybody tell you God writes your life for you. Oh, no, 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 no. He may have input. The left-hand side was my life as I had planned it. In the middle of the screen were all the conditions that came to me in this life in order to be able to fulfill what is on the left. And that's where I started laughing. It was really quite funny. I'm like, how could I have been so stupid? What was wrong with me? Because when I looked at what I had set, and I looked at what I had done with the conditions to help me accomplish it, I was in my way. And I'm here to tell you today, get out your way. And your way is full of all the things you want. One of the first things that I observed between these 2 parts of the screen was the fact that God gave me free will. And I'm wondering, why in the world, in all of his wisdom, did he do that? And you can imagine, I'm standing there like, oh my God, they never told me this in church. So then my attention got caught with the 3rd column. And the 3rd column looked as though someone had designed a stamp that said, objective not accomplished. So on the whole of the far end of the screen is just objective not accomplished, objective not accomplished. Now I'm really feeling like a fool. One of the things I also noticed in the scrolling was I was always a very empathic child. I grew up in Guyana, South America, where there was a tremendous amount of poverty. My father was a teacher, and if you're a teacher in a community where most people are illiterate, they treat you like you're Jesus Christ itself, you know? So we lived among farmers, etc. And my father would do things for them, like write letters for them, you know, fill up their forms, teach their children, and when they got crops, they would bring the crops. So we lived well, but for all of my life, I have lived with the feeling that I did not deserve to be able to eat every day when there were children around me who couldn't. We come to the end of the screen and I have a lot of questions. And the screen re-scrolls again, and only now they have dropped 7 lifetimes in there. So I can see why I don't understand so much of what's going on in my life. And one of the first things I noticed was my husband at the time, the marriage was having, I've been married twice, the marriage was having some problems. And one of the first things I noticed is that we had 3 lifetimes that we had lived together, and I was the one causing the problems, not him. So in the lifetime I was in, it was my turn, right? People harm. And that created a whole different dynamic on how I looked and I observed my marriage. So when the screen was over for the 2nd time, I asked the question again, well, how do you move around in this life? And it took me to the river. Yes, there's a river. We used to sing it. There's a river. Yes, we will gather at the river. Beautiful, beautiful river. There was a river. And on the other side of the river, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Some of them I could recognize because I had lived with them in the life I just left, but most of them I couldn't recognize by their feature, but I could recognize them by their love. The love, I could feel the connection of love that held us together. And then my aunt stepped forward, who was someone I really dearly loved, and she looked at me and she says, you can't stay. And I said, why? She says, no, you have to go back. And I said, why? And she says, you have to go back and tell them there's more to life than meets the eye. And I said, but there are millions of people back there. You can give that message to one of them. Why do I have to go back? And I said, no, you can't stay. You have to go back. And then I found myself falling. And the next experience I had was moving from this brilliant light, love, and joy into excruciating pain in my body. And within the next 24 hours, I realized that I had been changed.
Yeah, my near-death experience happened about 3 years ago. It was an experience which changed my life forever. In multiple ways, I became a happier, healthier, and a more peaceful person. So when general anesthesia was induced, about 10 to 15 minutes later, after the general anesthesia was induced, I saw myself floating about 10 to 12 feet above the operating table on the left side. And me being an anesthesiologist, my first reaction was, how is this possible? Did somebody put any LSD in my anesthesia? Or somebody used an anesthetic drug known as ketamine, which is a dissociative anesthesia and has LSD kind of reaction. But that was not the case. And my first reaction as a out-of-body experience was that I was not only present in the operating room, but I could also sense and see my mother and my sister in India. They were sitting in the lounge there, and it was evening time there, and they were having general discussion. My mom was wearing a green sari and a green sweater, and my sister was wearing a blue jean and a red sweater, which after 2-3 days of me getting better, I called and verified it. And in the operating room, I saw myself being cut and the infected fluid coming out, which was very awful smelling. One thing I distinctly remember is the joke told by an anesthesiologist. I can't repeat the joke, but he verified with me in the recovery room that he did tell the joke. But his reaction was, maybe you were light in anesthesia. But my question was, if I was light in anesthesia, I should have been hurting too. But I was not hurting. And from there, my consciousness traveled to different realms. The first realm it traveled to was a very hellish realm. It was pitch dark, there was thunderstorm, there was lightning, and there were very dark entities with crooked teeth running about, and I could hear different souls crying and wailing. Then I was made to lie on a bed of nails, and I was kind of tortured. My first reaction was, why am I here? And I asked them to stop. And I asked for anybody who could help me out. And then, after I realized why I had been here was because I had been a very mean person, a very unloving person, and not caring and getting ahead in life no matter what it took was my way of getting ahead in life. And then my father showed up, and he led me from the hellish realm towards a tunnel on where there was a bright light outside. And during the tunnel, traveled through the tunnel, I had review of my present life, which had started in the hellish realm. Then I had the review of my good part of the lives too, where I have been helpful to the people. But most amazing was, I had a review of my past lives. And 2 past lives I remember very well. One was, like, I was a poppy farmer in Afghanistan about 18th century or so. And then from the opium sap, I started tasting the opium sap myself, and I got addicted to opium. And another life I remember was, I was a cruel prince in the medieval times, and I was whipping the poor farmers with a whip. And that had led to my meanness in this present life, and my addiction of opium in Afghanistan led to addiction in this life. And actually I had suffered from a very severe wrist pain about 5 years before my NDE experience, and that time I had a regression done by Dr. Brian Weiss, and that time in present life I had gone back to previous life and asked forgiveness from the farmers, and they forgave me, and my hand got better. And I did not understand till my NDE how could one go backwards and ask for forgiveness. But during NDE I realized in the other realm the time is not necessarily linear, but past, present and future all fuse together and can exist as parallel universes at the same time. So from the hellish realm I went to the tunnel, and from the tunnel on the other side I was greeted by two young robust men. They were full of peace but full of strength, and telepathically they told me they were my guardian angels, and they were Raphael and Michael. Now it was very surprising to me being a Hindu, how could the angels showed up? And when I told my wife's first reaction was, what happened to the thousands of Indian gods and goddesses? None of them showed up. And from there I was guided by the angels towards a meadow. The meadow was beautiful with roses of different colors. A clear water stream was flowing, and there was sweet smell to the air. And there was a distant chant which sounded like Om or Ang to be correct, which I later on found was a primordial form of Om. And then as I went higher and higher in the realm, the consciousness became more formless. That's what the angels had told me too, that at the highest level the consciousness is totally formless. And then I found myself in front of a light. The light was like about 1,000 suns blazing at the same time, but it was not hurting the eyes. I felt unconditional love, like I talk about I could see love, I could hear love, I could touch love, I could taste love, and I could smell love. It was love all around. It's very hard to describe it. But the best word I have come to describe it, the word I felt, was the Sanskrit word Shanti, which means cosmic peace, cosmic harmony and bliss. And when I was in the presence of the light being talked to me without talking that my life will be spared, but when I go back, it will be totally different life. I'll have to give up materialism, maybe give up my career as an anesthesiologist, and be a healer of the soul, especially the three conditions I had suffered in my own life: depression, addiction, and chronic pain, and to help people with these things, three conditions, which I call diseases of the soul. And then I woke up with a jolt in the recovery room. My first reaction was to go down on my knees and thank heaven for the experience I had, but I could not get up. Obviously I had bandages around me. And after my NDE, I got better within 72 hours, that I was ready to be sent home on oral antibiotics. My addiction to the narcotics was gone overnight, but my depression and chronic pain took some time. I was at one time on 3 antidepressants, but now I'm happy to say I'm on none, and they had to be gradually tapered off, and my pain got better too. But other things happened in my life, like I sold my about 11,000 square foot house without putting it on the market. Me and my friend just exchanged it. And then I downsized my cars. I used to drive a sports Mercedes and a Hummer. Now I drive a Toyota Camry, a hybrid. So my life literally and figuratively went from Hummer to hybrid. And my nature changed too.
The first thing I was aware of later on was looking up and seeing the surgeon and hearing him say, "Pity you were too late, chaps." And he took off his mask and went off. And I was a bit concerned because I had all my faculties were still there. And then I became aware that I wasn't looking at the surgeon from the operating table, but I was way above looking down. And he was chatting, and they were closing the place up and putting lights out and all that sort of thing. And I had this incredible experience of moving up into a misty sort of area and then becoming aware that I was in a tunnel. And it was totally peaceful. It was a place of absolute compassion, of understanding, of no coercion to do anything at all. And I became aware actually that I wasn't me. I was a long tube with with rounded ends, and this tunnel started to form around the mist. And as soon as I was aware of that, the tube started to move up the tunnel. There was a big light at the end. And it came to rest just at the end of the tunnel. And I got out. I was no longer the tube. I was a sort of virtual baby in nappies, if you like. A symbol of total innocence, but completely without fear, and very curious about the light. And then this experience starts getting trite, because I didn't really have the language to describe it. But I got out and I went into this area of lighter area, which was sort of floored like alabaster marble and vague colours and movements and there were beings, not that I could see, but that I was aware of. And they were completely compassionate, loving, incredibly caring beings. And they said, this is the entrance to, and the wording is difficult here, the entrance to our level of life, if you like. These are our concepts, and these are some of our concepts. And if you feel that you if you can contribute to them, or even if you can understand them, you're welcome to come in. But they actually gave me all the experiences of all my lifetimes to make the decision whether to come in. And I looked at these concepts, and frankly, I didn't understand them. I thought, I just don't know enough. And I said to these, not said, but communicated to these amazing beings, I think I ought to go back. And then I was aware for the first time of the huge humour that's in the universe, and there was a sort of chuckle of appreciation. And the voices in unison said, we think you should. So I did. I got back into the tube and went hurtling down the tunnel, knowing that at the end of it, and the visual thing was shards of glass that I was going to have to go through and pain. And in the event, I just went through with no pain at all. And the next thing I knew was a voice shouting, Mr. Miller, are you in there? And I wanted to communicate all this to where I'd been and what had happened, what a wonderful thing it was. So, having come back into my body, I came back with a completely new set of values. All the values I'd had before, all the important things that I seemed to be doing before were just a nonsense. And I was just so glad to be alive and be capable of appreciating what we have here, of sounds and people and colours and flowers and growing things. And it was a fundamentally life-changing experience. And the other big thing is I came back completely without fear of anything, because once you're not afraid of death, there's not much point in being afraid of anything else.
And anyway, I got to a point in my life where I just wanted to give up. I was in so much despair, and felt my children would be better off without me as well. They'd have a better life without me, because I didn't really have too much of a life to offer. And anyway, I just wanted to give up, and I had cancer myself. I had breast cancer at the time, and I had black fluid coming from my breast, and the doctors were giving me a lot of Tylenol 3s, and I didn't really take them, but I kept them in the medicine cabinet at my sister's place. And then when I finally decided that I wanted to die, I had this plan already in my head, and I went out and I got myself a Mickey of whiskey, and I went inside the bathroom and started swallowing the pills. And I must have been about 90 of those Tylenol 3s, because I had a lot of those bottles. I had about 3 different bottles, and I swallowed all of them. I think maybe I might have dropped a couple down the sink, but I basically swallowed all of them. And I knew I was already starting to feel it, and I just started to drink the whiskey and went and sat down, made myself comfortable on the couch, and laid down and was ready to die. And when I first shut my eyes, I remember feeling that pain in my heart, that loneliness or despair, and that loss, that grief. But it was even worse because I was first in this place where I can hear my brothers and sisters talking about me and saying, like, why was she so selfish? Why did she do that? And didn't she ever think about us? And then I was just like, I can feel it tearing at my heart. And the more that I heard from my family members, the worse it felt.
And these are voices that you heard?
These were voices that I was hearing.
And what were you seeing as you were?
And at first I just seen, at first it was just dark. And then I was told I can hear this other voice, and it said, turn around. And I turned around and I can see that very small speck of light way off in the distance. And I started walking towards it because I was told, now go to that light. So I started walking towards that light, and I remember seeing the colors, different colors passing me by. And as I got closer to that light started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally it was just big enough for me to get in. It wasn't like a great big huge door. It was just big enough for me to get through. So I walked inside that light. But as I was going towards that light, I could hear that voice telling me, everybody has got a certain time on the earth. Everybody's given a certain time. You would feel that pain, that suffering that you had inflicted upon others until your time was either up or they forgave you. And that's how long you would have suffered. But because you were chosen before you were born to do something, right? And no one else can do it but you. And that's the reason why you're being given this chance. And then I walked inside the light, and I dropped to my knees because I can feel that overwhelming sensation of love. It was just so beautiful. I never felt it. And I began to cry. It was so beautiful. I never experienced that kind of love in my lifetime. And anyway, I seen a man standing there. And that man didn't have just one color of skin. His skin kept changing, all different colors. And when I looked into his eyes, he was like, I could see fire in his eyes. There's nothing else I could see of him. And I can hear the water behind him. I knew that there was a lake because I can hear that water. And I can hear the children playing and dogs barking. That they were happy. You can hear the happiness, eh? And the older people, I can hear them joking around and laughing as well. And I could have swore I recognized some of those voices of people that I knew that had passed. And that man started to talk, and he said, yes, you were chosen before you were born to do a job in the world that nobody else can do. And because of that, and the fact that you made a promise to God, the Great Spirit, the Creator of all things, because you made that promise, you have to fulfill it before you can come back here. And you have to go back. And when he said I had to go back, I grabbed hold of his legs, and I grabbed hold of him tight, and I was begging him, please don't send me back. I don't want to go back. And he says, yeah, you must go back. He says, but so that you remember this visit and that this is real. Every time you look into the mirror, you're going to have something to remember. Remember this by. And he sent me back. It was just like a bolt of lightning.
The doctor who had attended to examine me before, the nurse, they all came in order to clean the floor from the blood. Well, all this was indeed unusual. Subsequently, I was not examined there in the examination room, but was brought straightway to the intensive care unit, where I stayed, and as one knows, the practices of an emergency unit, there are curtains to the left and to the right of your bed, and the patient is connected to different devices recording physiological data. There in the intensive care unit, I still had a lot of pain, physical pain, and I didn't know how to position myself into the bed to be comfortable. I had extreme pain. Later on in my life, I had 3 births, but the pains I had in connection with the cystitis were simply indescribable. Then suddenly I felt as if the room behind me had changed. This means that suddenly I had no more pain, and I felt as if the room behind me would open. The walls, in this case the curtains of this room, suddenly dissolved, so that I found myself in another room. But I did not see my body from above or something like that, but I was in this other room in the form of a soul. And this awareness was simply, well, I would say, indescribable. That means not easy to describe in human terms. I was completely separated from my body, and I no longer perceived it anywhere, contrary to what other people say. And also, I was not in a tunnel or anything like it, but I was really, let me say, in the next room. And there was pure light, like a light yellow, very bright light, is how I would describe it. But neither did it dazzle, nor was it too hot for me. It was just pure shelteredness. There, shelteredness, pure love, simply unconditional love, freedom, infinity of the being. Well, it's indescribably beautiful, and in my case, I was first allowed to enjoy this place, this state, for a moment. And first, I also did not perceive other beings or so, but I simply was so sheltered, floating. But then there was more or less a recall, like, hello, you have not yet finished. There is one more thing waiting for you. And then I saw an angel on my left side. How I would describe it. In fact, this was not an angel, as usually illustrated in the pictures or shown in paintings, but it was a formless white figure, and around it a golden gleam, with a bright golden yellow shimmer around this luminous appearance. It was a giant figure. I realized that this appearance was a kind of companion for me in this phase. So this angel showed me my present situation on earth, and that I had not yet finished with it. So I had to view the present situation on earth which I would leave behind, thereby seeing my apartment with the dirty laundry, as well as with the still unpaid bills of the month, and this is meant in the truest sense of the word. I realized I would leave all this behind. I simply realized my whole earthly situation as it was. I realized it 100%, namely with increased consciousness, I'd say, very clearly. I saw all this somehow three-dimensionally, and for a moment I really had the impression that I was inside my apartment and therefore able to say goodbye to my earthly existence as such. And so I also was shown my closest relatives, which means that I was allowed to say goodbye quite consciously to my loved ones. Then I was aware of what this farewell would mean to the bereaved relatives. And as for me, the situation was specific, because at the same time I was in hospital, my father was in one hospital, suffering from an incurable form of leukemia, and my elderly grandmother was also seriously ill, and she was in yet another hospital. So I realized, now I just simply will die. It will be very hard for my family because their focus was quite different, because my father had already been ill for several months and it was all about his health and his disease and his blood values and about everything feasible. And there were also worries about my grandmother. And under these circumstances, I would simply have passed away. I knew that it's going to be tough for them. I knew exactly how bad it would be for each one of them. But nevertheless, I also knew that it was okay. But I perceived their souls, one might say, three-dimensionally. And I could say goodbye to each individual. Well, the specific thing was that I felt that I had enough time to do so. There was no stress, and it was based on the motto, buck up, you've got to say goodbye now. The angel is waiting. But I really had time to do all this with all my heart and very conscientiously. And having finished saying goodbye to all of them, I approached the angel once again and said to him quite deliberately, if it's time for me to pass away now, I will join you. Then I didn't even have time to think. I just felt a jerk and I was back in my body, suffering pain again. And well, this was really hard, but I didn't have a choice. But it was clear to me that I would leave this earth and I would die leaving behind this life. Well, then if life still went on, and for a moment this was very hard for me, because on the one hand I suffered physical pain again, and on the other hand it was very hurtful to be forced to go back into this narrowness, as in this case into my body, actually being too small for a soul, and back into a world which actually is much too cold and too rigid, and compared with the reality prevailing after death, my return to earth left a lot to be desired.
こんにちは。私はこういう機会に恵まれまして、本当に嬉しく思っています。私は、現在81歳になります。そして5年前までは牧師をしておりました。そしてちょっとした病気で牧師を引退しまして、今家庭で、小さな教会を手伝っているというそのところです。名前は加藤充と言います。1940年生まれになります。私は母がクリスチャンでした。そして、9歳の時に私のある出来事があって、そして私いたずら坊主だったんでね、それで母に諭されて、クリスチャンだった母に諭されて、イエス様にお詫びし、私の悪いことした相手にもお詫びをしました。その時から私クリスチャンになったような気持ちを持っていました。静岡市のチームに入って、 で国体のラグビーの予選に出ました。で予選の勝ち進んで2試合目に私は非常にタックルして、そして脳震盪を起こし、脳障害、脳挫傷ですね。それを起こしてしまって3日間の昏睡状態。病院で目が覚めたわけですけれども、その時に私は大変な経験をイエス様にさせていただきました。私はこの脳挫傷で、そして言葉も何も意識不明の状態が3日続いたようですけれども、お医者さんは生きるかどうかわからないという診断を下したようですけれども、神様は守ってくださって、私に命を与えてくださいましたけれども、私はその生きている、何ですか、病院に昏睡状態で眠っている時にね、私はイエス様の幻を見たんです。もちろん子供の頃、教会にイエス様のことを知ってましたし、クリスマスのこともよく知ってましたし、で、イエス様が私の生死の間をさまよっている時に幻を見せてくださいました。私は真っ暗闇を歩んでました。そして幅の広い川の川岸に立っていました。で、川岸広い川があって、対岸は綺麗な場所でした。そこの木の茂みの中に真っ白い衣を着た人が立っていてね、私を招きます。私はそこに行こうとして橋を探して、そして足をかけて行こうとしたら、後ろから止められましたんで、私は、まずその時渡ったら死んでいたんでしょうけども、渡らないようになったので、生き返ったんですね。そして3日後に私は記憶が戻ってね、そして病院生活2ヶ月半続きました。そして私は、そんな状態の中で、本当に何を夢見たんだ、幻を見た時にね、それが何だったのかはっきりわからなかった。でもだんだん私、もしかしたらイエス様かもしれないというふうな気持ちを持っていました。
मेरा नाम मुफ्ती शमसुद्दोहा है। मुझे याद है कि जब तक मैं धार्मिक निंदक और नास्तिक था, मुझे नर्क में कोई विश्वास नहीं था, मगर मुझे ये जानने की इच्छा रहती थी कि जिंदगी के बाद क्या, भगवान का अर्थ क्या है। ठीक ढंग से चल भी नहीं पाता था और मैं सोचने में असमर्थ था और 2 हफ्ते बाद मुझे अस्पताल में भर्ती होना पड़ा। डॉक्टर मुझे देखकर ये अंदाजा नहीं लगा सकते थे कि मैं अगले दिन जीवित रहूंगा या नहीं। मुझे याद है कि मैं बिस्तर पर पीठ के बल लेटा हुआ था। मैं मर रहा था और मैं मर गया। फ्लैश की तरह आत्मा ने मेरा शरीर छोड़ दिया और मैं ब्रह्मांड में एक गुब्बारे की तरह तेज गति से घूम घूम कर उड़ रहा था। मेरा शरीर अब भी मेरे साथ था, मगर वो एक पंख की तरह हल्का था। मैंने देखा कि मैं हजारों गैलेक्सीज के पास से गुजर रहा था और कुछ ही पल बाद मैं एक ऐसी जगह पर पहुंचा जहां एक चमकदार टेबल पड़ा था। वहां पर लोग रोशनी में नहाए हुए बैठे थे, मनुष्यों की तरह लग रहे थे। उनका शरीर और सिर सफेद कपड़े में लिपटा हुआ था। मैं उन्हें देख नहीं पाया, मैं समझ नहीं पाया कि वो फरिश्ते थे या जज थे, क्या थे पता नहीं। जहां तक मुझे याद है वो 10 लोग ही थे। तभी मैं घूमने लगा जैसे रस्सी से बंधा हूं। मैं पूरे होश में था और घूम रहा था। मैं उनकी तरफ देख रहा था, मगर ये कैसे संभव है। मैं फिर रोने लगा। मैंने सोचा मैं मर ही जाऊंगा। मैंने बिना प्रश्न किए अपने पाप गिनने शुरू कर दिए, जो बहुत थे। लड़कों और आदमियों के वो सभी पाप, झूठ, चोरी, ज्यादा खाना, सेक्स, नशा, ये सभी मैंने किया। चाहे वो कितने ही छोटे बड़े हों, कोई फर्क नहीं। उन्होंने मुझे दिखाया कि मेरी जिंदगी में अच्छा दिखाने लायक कुछ भी नहीं, और मैंने रोते हुए मुआफी मांगी। तभी किसी ने कोमलता से कहा, वो किसी पुरुष की आवाज थी जो मेरे दिमाग को सुनाई दी, तुम्हें मुआफ किया, अभी तुम्हारा समय नहीं है। उसी क्षण में ब्रह्मांड के किनारे उठते हुए नीचे आ रहा था। गैलेक्सीज मेरी दाईं तरफ थी। मैं जैसे पहले उड़कर आया था, विचित्र तरीके से नीचे आ रहा था। मैं अपने शरीर में वापस आ रहा था जो अस्पताल में पड़ा था। मैं पहले कभी अपनी जिंदगी में इतना नहीं जागा था। मैं ठीक होना शुरू हो गया, शायद दवाइयों का असर था। कुछ साल के बाद मैंने मेडिकल रिपोर्ट देखने का मौका मिला। पेज के शिखर में लिखा था, रिकवरी चौंका देने वाली है, जो कि सच थी। मैं उस समय के लिए धन्यवादी हूं और भगवान का असीम दया, प्यार और माफी के लिए भी। मैंने ऐसे कई लोगों की कहानियां पढ़ी हैं जिनका मृत्यु के साथ करीब का अनुभव रहा। ये सब हमें प्यार, मन की शांति और जिंदगी के बारे में समझाती है। ईश्वर की संसार पर कोमलता, दया रूपी प्रदर्शन को देखकर मैं बहुत रोता था और आज भी रोता हूं। बच्चे मेरा मजाक उड़ाते थे, मगर मैंने इसकी कभी परवाह नहीं की, क्योंकि मैं जानता हूं कि जिंदगी एक बेशकीमती तोहफा है जो हमें मिला है, और मौका मिला है। प्यार दो, प्यार को अनुभव करो, क्योंकि प्यार से ही भगवान मिलता है। 5 साल अस्पताल में रहने के बाद और शरीर के अनुभवों से बाहर आकर मैंने धार्मिक रास्ते पर दरवेश की तरह कदम रखा।
Takže můj příběh se odehrával 11. srpna v 88. roce, kdy s kamarádem, kterým jsme spolu studovali strojní průmyslovku v Hradci, jsme jeli o prázdninách se vykoupat, vzali jsme motorky a jezdili jsme k řece Orlice, což bylo u Tyniště nad Orlicí, a zaskákali jsme si tam šipky, tak jako vždycky předtím. A ten den se stalo takového něco zvláštního. Ono to vlastně začalo celé takovou mojí neposlušností, kdy otec mi řekl, abych něco udělal, pro něho jel něco nakoupit a já jsem nechtěl. A na motorkách jsme se teda s tím kamarádem zastavili u řeky a rozhodli jsme se, že si budeme zaskákat šipky do vody. A tenkrát, ten den to bylo krátce chvilku po dešti a na břehu, když já jsem se rozběhl, tak mi uklouzla noha a my jsme skákali v té době vždycky lomeňáky. A to byly šipky, kdy byl člověk jakoby hodně zakloněný a na břehu mi ujela noha, protože ten břeh byl vlhký a mokrý. A kamarád, který už skočil asi 5 minut předtím, tak potom vyplaval na pláž, tam usnul a já si chviličku po tom, co jsem skákal, tak jak už ten skok byl, nedržel jsem nad ním kontrolu, nad svým tělem, nestačil jsem dát vlastně ruce dopředu před sebe a když jsem dopadal na hladinu, tak se vlastně tenkrát stalo, že asi z výšky přibližně 3,5 metru jsem dopadl na hladinu vlastně nekontrolovatelně a čistě o hladinu jsem si rozdrtil 5., 6. krční obratel, což je někde tady v těch místech, kde člověk pohybuje krkem. Vteřinu potom jsem najednou zjistil, že jsem celý ochrnul a nemohl jsem hýbat vůbec ničím, rukama, nohama, hlavou. Celé mé tělo úplně komplexně ochrnulo a to byla situace, z které nešlo nijak vyjít ven, nemohl jsem ničím pohnout, nemohl jsem tu situaci zvrátit. A já jsem najednou věděl, že budu muset se nadýchnout a že už nemůžu nadýchnout vzduch, protože jsem pod vodou a přemýšlel jsem o tom, že přijde okamžik konce, že přijde smrt a tenkrát jsem se velmi bál. Bál jsem se především toho, že umřu a že nevím, co je potom. Nikdy jsem předtím nic o smrti nevěděl, nikdy jsem nic o smrti neslyšel, ani o křesťanství, ani o duchovních věcech. Jsme se prostě doma, ani v okolí, ani ve škole v tom 88. roce, o ničem takovém jsme se nebavili. A najednou ten okamžik smrti, to byla velmi zvláštní věc. Já jsem myslel, že to bude něco jakoby, že bude cvák jako vypínač světla. Cvák je tma, cvák je světlo. A ono se něco takového stalo, ale byl to takový cvák, takový jeden jediný okamžik, kdy ten okamžik smrti já můžu popsat tak, že já jsem se najednou ohlédl za sebe a na dně v té řece jsem viděl ležet své tělo, tak jak je tady teďka před vámi, tak jak já tady jsem, ale přitom já, tak jak se cítím v tento okamžik, jako moje osoba, Jan Boštík, moje identita, byla tady, ale moje tělo leželo tam. A to byl ten okamžik smrti, kdy moje duše se oddělila od mého těla. Potom vlastně následovalo to, že já jsem přemýšlel, co se stalo. Nevěděl jsem, kde jsem, nevím, proč se to stalo. Jediné, co jsem vnímal, že to jsem pořád já, a akorát jsem nevěděl, kde jsem. A najednou, aniž bych já sám chtěl, tak moje tělo bylo tažené takovým úzkým tmavým prostorem. Na jehož konci jsem se dostal do místa, které bylo osvětleno takovou růžovo-žlutou barvou. A v tom místě jsem najednou cítil pocity euforie, blaha, štěstí a druhý pocit, ten byl velmi zvláštní. Já jsem najednou cítil, že už jsem tam někdy byl, že jsem tam doma, že jsem se vrátil domů. To byl prioritnější pocit domova, jakoby víc než ten domov u rodičů. To bylo velmi silné. A krátce na to vlastně nás se stala jedna velmi, velmi zvláštní věc. Já jsem do toho okamžiku byl úplně nevěřícím člověkem, který nikdy neslyšel o Bibli, neslyšel o Ježíši Kristu. A já jsem najednou cítil, že někdo přišel a že stojí za mnou. A tak jsem se otočil a za mnou stála postava zalitá v zářícím světle. A teď se stala velmi, velmi zázračná věc, kdy ve vteřině, kdy já jsem se podíval na to světlo, tak jsem okamžitě věděl, že to světlo je Ježíš Kristus. I když jsem k tomu neměl žádné podklady, žádné informace, žádné zkušenosti, vůbec nic. Okamžitě jsem věděl, že to je Ježíš Kristus. Najednou vlastně se začalo odehrávat několik velmi intimních scén s tím Ježíšem Kristem, kdy on si mě vzal k sobě, objímal mě. Já jsem najednou cítil, že se netopím ve vodě, ale že se topím v pocitu jeho lásky, kterou mě jakoby zahrnul. To bylo velmi silné, velmi, velmi intimní. A já jsem najednou cítil, že on mě zná mě jménem, ale znal i celý můj život. A já ho neznal, já jsem vůbec nevěděl, kdo to je, ale bylo to velmi příjemné setkání. A on mě potom, než odešel, tak mi vlastně položil otázku něco v tom smyslu, co chci říct o svém životě, jak ho chci obhájit. A to byla jednoduchá otázka, ale stala se velmi zvláštní věc. Já jsem na tuhle jednoduchou otázku neměl co odpovědět. Do svých 17 let to, co jsem prožil, znal, věděl, tak jsem nemohl nic použít. A já jsem se cítil velmi nepříjemně a pokořeně. Cítil jsem se jako, že nic nejsem, jako, že nic neznamenám. To bylo nepříjemné. Krátce potom vlastně následovalo to, že tenhle ten pocit jakoby odezněl a já jsem se znovu cítil, že tam jsem doma, že mi je příjemně, že to je pocit blaženosti, euforie. A ten prostor pokračoval někam přirozeně dál. A já jsem viděl, že ten prostor se rozděluje na cestu doleva a doprava a já jsem nepřemýšlel, si půjdu doleva nebo doprava. Prostě jsem chtěl někam jít dál. A najednou, než jsem došel k tomu rozcestí, tak těsně u rozcestí jsem slyšel znovu hlas toho Ježíše Krista a on řekl větu, kterou si pamatuju dodnes velmi dobře. Stůj, vrať se, ještě není tvůj čas. Já jsem nechtěl v tu chvíli jakoby poslechnout, protože jsem chtěl jít dál a najednou tu větu on zopakoval. Stůj, vrať se, ještě není tvůj čas. A v ten okamžik mě vlastně vzal a já jsem se ocitl zpátky ve svém těle.
One time, this included a visit to Tibet. While I was there in a small village, an old man asked me about my beliefs. I told him I don't believe in anything until I see it with my own eyes. He smiled and said that I'll see, because everybody sees when their time comes. I forgot about it and went on with my trip. I remember it was a fine Sunday starry night when we were trekking from the mountains back to the plains. I had to camp out that night and found a place next to the road sheltered by a steep hill. At 2 a.m. in the morning, there was a landslide. It happened so fast that I had no time to wake up and scramble out of the way. There was this great rumble, and before I knew anything, I got buried inside it. Everything went unconscious. I thought I died. Maybe I did. I think I did because I wasn't breathing. I was buried inside many tons of sand and gravel. While this blackout, I saw a man, tall, dark, and with a kind smile. He picked me up and asked me, "How are you feeling?" I wasn't sure, so I said, "I think it's a dream." He said, "When it is your time to see, you never are dreaming." I suddenly remember what the old man said the other day. I asked his name. He said he will tell me when it's my time to know. He then started chanting something in a language so unknown and yet so beautiful. I felt elevated. I was suddenly outside the rubble. I asked him how I got out. He said, "I didn't, my soul did." He then gave me a visit of different places in the world. We were flying and talked about life, death, and nirvana. He showed me different cities of Thailand, but I don't remember the names of the city. But some of them were China, Surin, Supan, and Bangkok, he told me. I look at this world almost every day and make sure that all are on the right path. Death is what decides your fate of either entering in hell or in heaven, and it depends on your deeds done in this world.
But I was also allowed to experience that every day I am here is a gift of God. No matter if this day is good or difficult, or if I feel good or if I have a great problem, every day is a gift from God. And being aware that life will end at some point makes it worth living, so that I don't delay or put off doing important things, and that I can experience daily life here consciously and enjoy it whenever possible. That's it.